Hi, I'm Charles Kovacs. And you? You're an educator. Oh, maybe you're a facilitator or a teacher or a presenter, but there's education involved in those careers. Which kind of an educator are you? Are you a preacher? Or are you a scientist? Those are the two extremes, and you're somewhere in between. Would you like me to describe what I believe the educational environments are like for those two? Here you go. The scientist. The scientist creates a learning environment which increases the student's capability cognitively to understand the content. One more time. The scientist educator creates an environment which increases the cognitive capability of the students with respect to the content. We don't make students learn, we cause them to want to learn. How? Through the environment that we create. That's the purpose. What are the resources? We have the educator, we have the student. The students are assumed to be willing and able, but require a little bit of motivation to learn, to want to learn. And the educator, they're a content expert, meaning they can break down complex ideas into simple thoughts and ideas and explain them. And that they are knowledgeable in educational theory, meaning that they know how to create a presentation which is engaging, thought-provoking, and causes students to want to learn the material. What's the procedure? Well, the procedure is done according to Madeline Hunter's lesson planning. That's the basis of all Western lesson planning. The observations. What are the observations in the classroom for the scientist? Well, the observations are either the students are engaged in learning or they're not. It's as simple as that. What are the conclusions? Well, the conclusions are the students learned, they didn't learn. Not quite. The conclusions are twofold. Yes, the students increase their cognitive capability with respect to the content. How much? Well, that depends on our lesson objectives, the learning objectives. That's why it's so important at the beginning to have clear and concise learning objectives so that we're able to evaluate the increase in the student's cognitive capability with respect to the content. If they increased or showed a cognitive level that was desired or planned for, then the students learn. That's the first conclusion. The second is that we were successful in our ability, we were successful in our planning to create an environment which was conducive to learning. And remember, it is our job, it is our purpose to increase the chances that students want to learn. We cause students to want to learn. Now, if we did not meet the levels of cognitive capability, then we use those learning objectives and our knowledge of educational theory to reflect on what we could do better next time to cause students to want to learn. So in the scientific model, learning objectives are used for two things: to gauge whether students increase their knowledge or cognitive capability with respect to the content, but also as a means to gauge how well as educators we were able to how well we were able to do our job. And that's why learning objectives are so important for scientists. Now, the preacher, what does the preacher do? They get up and talk. Do they have objectives? Yes, to finish their sermon. What's the procedure? They talk. What are the observations? They talk. The audience listens or it doesn't listen. What are the conclusions? The audience listened or they didn't listen. What's the difference between the preacher and the scientist? The preacher really doesn't consider the learning objectives, whereas the scientist uses the learning objectives both to gauge their own efficacy as well as the amount of learning that the students did. So, which are you? Which are you closer to, the preacher or the scientist? I'll bet you it's the scientist. And that's why you listened all the way to the end of my presentation. Thanks for your time. This is Charles Nakshinam Kovac saying, take care.